Hi everyone, welcome to week 2 of Code Sprint A. I hope that you're starting to feel comfortable with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and what each language does that is unique to that language. This week we are going to be diving deeper into HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and actually building that quiz application. And we're also going to dive into React for the first time. So I'm going to switch over to my desktop here so that we can look at the canvas. So week 2 has a similar structure to week 1. We have an overview page, which should be your starting point for the week. This video that you're watching will be here, and then there are a couple of assignments for this week. I have, it's the same amount of content as we did for the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript crash course last week, 10 points. I've just split it up into two different assignments here because we have one that's and this is the bulk of this week, is building the quiz game in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then a smaller tutorial on just getting up and started with React for the first time. So same deal with these, is run through them. There's a bonus at the bottom that is not required. It's optional, but also recommended because animations are fun. So go through these, work through the code, make sure you understand it, and submit a screenshot and a zip of your project. Same thing for the React, except there's just one shorter video here getting started with and introducing the idea of working with React. And then there is also our first milestone for the final project. So this milestone is all about thinking about your final project, which we talked about at the beginning of, we talked about during last week's optional class session. So the final project is basically a small self-directed project that you're going to build with React. And because this is a 5-week course, I do mean that it's going to be small in terms of scope, and I'll help you figure out what is a reasonable scope based on your skill set that you're bringing in. And for this assignment, I'm not too worried about you thinking about constraints. It's okay if you're pie in the sky for this week and dreaming big. And when I look at your project idea, your pitch, and when your classmates look at your project idea and pitch, we'll be able to scope it down. So a couple things to keep in mind: that this class is just about front-end programming. So you're not going to be able to hook it up to a database. You're not going to be able to have like a multiplayer game or an application where you're going to have someone be able to sign in. Those are things that we will talk about in future classes in Code Sprint B and C, but I will show you how to store and save some data locally in the browser. So there is a possibility that you can create an application, like a to-do application, that every time the user comes back to it, there is memory in your application, that it has remembered the past to-dos that the user has entered. And if you signed up for Code Sprint B and C, this is a project that you can potentially take forward into those classes. So for this class, I'll have you focus on the front end, and then if you take it forward to Code Sprint B, I'll start having you think about the database, and Code Sprint C will start thinking about the server-side part of your application. Some example project ideas: you can create a Pomodoro timer app to help users focus, and I have a link here to what Pomodoro is. It's basically just a productivity hack where you set up a timer for 20-25 minutes and work on one task for that time. You could build a note-taking app, you could build a journaling app, a recipe app. You'd also build an app around an existing API. We talk about APIs this week and look at an API that gives us trivia questions that we use when we're building our application. And I've got a list here of some free APIs that you can sign up for, like Weather API, Dictionary, Flickr, NASA. You got a lot of different options for data sources that you could bring into your application if you wanted to, or you could take the trivia app that we're building in class and remix it to create something new. So like a slight tweak of a trivia app turns it into a study application, or like a flashcard application. So down here, there are the instructions for what should be in your final project pitch here. The content might look something like this. So I want you to have the class that you're signed up for, the date, your name, a description of your project. Here I'm pitching that I'm going to make a to-do application, and I'm listing out some of the features that I think this application might need, like the ability for the user to create individual to-do items, which are just a string of text, and then a view that lets me see all of my to-dos, and a button that lets me mark to-dos as complete, etc. So those are listed out here. And then there's some technical requirements to go along with it. So I want to see that the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that we did in class last week is starting to make sense, and that you're feeling comfortable in those languages. So your HTML should feature all of these elements in it. Your CSS should have a custom color scheme. You should center your contents of your page. You should load a font. You should use an ID, a class. The CSS should be stored in a CSS file and linked to your HTML. So all of these are things that we have done in last week's tutorials. It is just now you're going to have to do them yourself in a new project. And similarly, create a script that prompts the user for their name and then displays a welcome message on the page. There are a lot of different ways to do that, but I've got a video here that shows you an example of one way that might look. Again, this is stuff that we did in the tutorials, so go back through the project that you built to look for inspiration for how to do those things. There are a couple optional extra credit challenges here that you can tackle. Each is worth an extra 0.25 points on this assignment. So incorporating an image element, incorporating a transition or an animation, or adding a button that changes the color of your page. Submitting this, it is zipping up your project files, it's taking a screenshot of your project, and then it's also posting that screenshot into Teams in the project progress channel. And this will be how next week we will be able to give each other some feedback on our projects. So this assignment will be a chance for you to try writing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript from scratch without following a pre-written tutorial that shows you step-by-step how to do it. So this may be challenging for some of you, especially if this is your first time writing any code. So I highly recommend you start early on this assignment. Like, some of this is week 1 material and doesn't rely on any of the week 2 material. So you can start working on this immediately and then sort of hop into the tutorials and come back to this and keep going back and forth as you need to. I also have office hours that you can sign up for if you're hitting a roadblock as you're thinking through this. And let's jump back to the main page here. So the other thing is that we have our optional class meeting on Friday at 4 p.m. where the plan is to, for folks that have their project idea already, be able to share it with anyone else that shows up and get some feedback. And also we will have time in that class session for questions. So it'll kind of be like an open house for asking questions about HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and React. So I will see some of you on Friday, and have a good week.